Productive Disruption is a podcast presented by Rhodes Branding, spotlighting bold and innovative ideas that have the ability to reshape K-12 education. If you're looking for actionable ideas about how to operate and innovate your school, you've come to the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Productive Disruption. My name is Dan Wire, and I'm the VP of Operations here at Rhodes Branding. Today, we have on Brian White, who is the Executive Director of HR and Operations at Auburn-Washburn USA 437 in Topeka, Kansas. And he also serves as the President of the American Association of School Personnel Administrators. Well, awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I can read your resume and have an idea of what you do, but do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about your story and how you got started and your career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'd have to start with the fact that my mother was a teacher growing up. So education was always kind of part of our family, an important part of our family. My career in human resources actually started, I was working for Target Corporation in their distribution centers. And I worked in the transportation position, operations position. In the operations position, I focused a lot on how we can get better, how our employees can be more successful through looking at training, how we can help support them to be more effective in their positions. And so I got asked to take a training position in the distribution center, and it turned out that was part of HR. And so that was kind of my start into the HR world. And I moved into an HR position and moved to Topeka to help open up a distribution center in HR. Wanted to continue to grow and develop professionally, and had the opportunity to move to a corporate headquarters at Payless Shoe Source. Served in a couple different roles there. My last role was the human resource manager for the south zone of the country. So I was traveling quite a bit. The school district I work for now is the district that we chose for our daughters when we moved to Topeka. And the person in my role was retiring, and I had a couple people reach out to me and say, hey, would you be interested in applying for this? And I thought, who's crazy enough to hire somebody that's not a teacher? But at the time, it sounded like a great opportunity, allow me to be home more for my daughters. With my mom being a teacher, education has always been kind of near and dear to my heart. Never found the right opportunity. I thought, this might be an opportunity for me now with my experiences that I might have something I could be able to provide or and help the school district and continue to be successful, but from a human resources strategic perspective. So
that's awesome.
So 10 years later, here I am. So I guess it worked out.
Yeah, I guess so. So we had the chance to catch up a few weeks ago, and you mentioned on our first call, coming from the private sector, just the overall differences from a strategy standpoint, especially on the recruitment side, from what the private sector is doing in recruitment versus maybe what you're seeing from school districts. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what were some of those strategies that you kind of saw that maybe could be improved, and have you seen a shift in HR best practices over the years since you've been working in public education?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have seen a shift over the years, and I've seen some positive shifts. So some of the key strategies that I think of that I saw a lot in private industry that we could look at using in public education or in education in general. One of the first concepts is what I call candidate experience. So if you're a shopper, or anybody out there is a shopper, when you go shopping, you have an experience. And if you have a good experience, you might tell others about it. You might tell others to go shop there. And you'll tell people about the deal you found. If you have a bad experience, then you're likely going to tell others it was a bad experience. Don't go shop there. And so when you think about that from a recruiting perspective, candidates do the same thing. And so the experience that your candidates have can directly impact your talent pool. And so if you're doing things that are turning candidates away, then they're going to tell others, don't go apply there. And in the labor market we have right now and the teacher talent shortage, you don't want to do things that are shrinking your talent pool. So that candidate experience can become a very important strategy in your recruitment and hiring process. And so you really have to look at the different touch points along the candidate's journey. And so a touch point really is where a candidate has an experience with your recruitment or hiring process. And so as you go through, as a school district, you really need to look at those steps in your processes for recruitment and hiring and think about it. What is the candidate's experience at that point? And is it something that we want them to have? Is it something that they would like to have? Do they have the information they need? And how are we communicating with them at that point? And if you start to look at those things in your process, you'll identify some things you can make better. And so that candidate experience, one of the key things that comes out of that candidate experience is how important communication is throughout the hiring and recruitment process. And so it's really important to look at that communication. I would say another strategy that comes to mind really is around relationships, which ties into candidate experience. And this is something really that I saw and learned in what educators are doing as I came into the district. And educators understand in order to connect with a student, you really have to understand more about the student, build relationships with them, understand what motivates and inspires them, how to communicate with them, what ways helps them to learn better. And it's really more about meeting the needs of the student. And so as you think about that from an HR strategy, we're in a labor market where we really need to think about how do we meet the needs of the candidate. There were days in the past in my career and in education as well where you had multiple candidates for every position. And that's not the case anymore, And so I think we've moved to more of a philosophy of building relationships with candidates to help understand what their wants are, what their needs are, and start trying to find a way that we can match those where it makes sense. And so that relationship side of recruiting becomes critical to hiring success during this time. Another, I guess, last thing I can think about comes to mind, and this is going to sound a little cheesy, but, our executive director of ASPA, which is our national organization that I'm president for, she says recruitment is the new retention. And she's exactly right. So when you have a shortage of staffing, one of the things that's important is not to lose the people that you have that you don't want to lose. And that's where retention becomes an important recruiting strategy itself. And so as a school district or a school, a charter school, private school, you really need to look at your current staff and make sure that you're doing things to recruit them as well so that you don't lose them. So when you think about retention, you really need to look at things like, doing stay interviews with your staff, some of your top staff, to find out, how they're doing, what would cause them to leave, what keeps them here, are there any obstacles you can remove for them? Engagement surveys become important. Surveying your employees to find out and get anonymous feedback from them on how they feel about their jobs. And as you get that information, you have to action plan on it to make improvements in the workforce. So I guess to answer your question, the three things that came to mind, were the candidate experience, relationships matter, and you've got to recruit your own staff, and that's retention.
I love it. Yeah, all three of those are just, vital in their own different ways. And one thing we focus a lot on as an agency are generational differences. Recruiting a 21-year-old, 22-year-old straight out of college is completely different than someone who's maybe been in the profession for a while and is looking for a career change in some way, shape, or form for whatever reason. How have you seen this current generation of 21, 22-year-olds that are entering the teaching profession? What shifts have you seen in regards to how you have to engage with them differently in the hiring process, versus, what you had to do maybe, 10, 15 years ago when, digital and social media wasn't really, what it is today?
Right. So that's a great question. I would say the one word I can sum that up with is speed. So when you think about recruitment strategies, HR strategies, that generation, you've got to have speed built into your process. And what I mean by that is they are digitally proficient. They are used to fast communication, quick responses. And so you've got to make sure that you don't have things that are happening in your process that's going to alienate them. One of the things that we do when we look at recruitment strategies and HR strategies is you kind of really have to look at kind of a matrix a little bit for communication when I talk about communication and candidate experience, because you have to think about how do I communicate with the different generations and what works for those generations. So not as a school district, I can't just communicate with one method and expect it's going to reach all the audiences. So, we have to think about some of those things. And so I'm not an expert in Instagram or TikTok or other types of social media platforms, but I know that we have to have a presence there so that when somebody in the younger generation is coming out and looking to teach in a school district, if they look, at least, we have a presence where they are. And I think it's really important strategy to have a presence where your candidates are so that as they look for information, you're relevant. And you also provide them with information that they need to decide if they're going to have an interest in exploring opportunities with you.
I love that. Yeah. And, that for me, that this is a really timely conversation. I'm coming off of a week. A couple weeks ago, we just spent a few days in Chicago for the National School PR Association Conference. And, among, many topics was that kind of, synergy between the human resources office and the public relations office within a school district. And we heard school districts across the country having this exact same conversation of, how do we help our HR office, reach, some of these younger candidates, and how do we help them reach, some of the older candidates too, who are changing jobs, because they're interacting with, our brand completely different than, someone who's, 21, 22 years old who gets most of their information through TikTok. So, how I guess from your standpoint, like, how can those two departments work more, closely together to, help school districts recruit and retain teachers more effectively?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked earlier about, what I learned from private industry. And so working, especially at the corporate headquarters, how important the relationship between marketing and HR was in employment brand and the recruitment process. And so as I moved into the school district, one of the first things that I did was built a partnership with our communications director, who's responsible for PR in our district. And so it's interesting that you talk about that, because it truly is critical in a school district to have that partnership between HR and PR communications, because so much of those things interact and complement each other from an employment brand perspective and a recruiting perspective. So a lot of the materials that are used for patrons, parents, and staff to communicate about the school district are things that I can use for recruitment. And a lot of things that we share for recruitment also help with the image and brand of our school district to our community. So we partner quite a bit together about information, communication, materials as we look to help our school district be successful in general. So we actually, it's funny you mentioned NSPRA, because he and I did a NSPRA Power Hour back in December 2019, talking about this very subject matter, how important it is to partner together. So some of the things that we were really able to work on between HR and communications or PR was the website. So looking at our careers website, it's a lot different when you look at a careers website from an HR perspective than when you do from a PR perspective. And so you got to have both of those. And if you only look from one perspective, you're going to be missing out on some things that might benefit that candidate, information they need to apply, information that's relevant to them, but also the ease of use of your site and how efficient it is in helping that candidate find the information they need. So I'm not a website expert, but our communications director is, so he's able to help me a lot with redesigning and rebranding our website. So that's very important. Social media is another aspect. Again, our public relations and communications professionals are much more, I would say, fluid and knowledgeable about social media market than I am. So I learn a lot from them about how to do things. Simple things like looking at, how effective is what you share, looking at the views and the shares and the clicks and those type of things. So your partners can really help you understand identifying metrics that can help you learn more about what you're doing. Is it effective or not? As you try to help hire staff for your district and build a talent pipeline. So communications, I've talked before about how important that is to experience and the candidate experience, but also your employee experience too with your current employees. So our PR person and communications director is very involved with communication with staff, and I'm very involved with communication with candidates. So there's a lot that we can learn from each other and talk about in that communication. And I think the more that your communication is consistent and looks the same and sounds the same and is on brand, the better off you're going to be. I would say that you don't want to have somebody have a different experience in their recruitment process, and when they come in the district, communication looks entirely different. You don't recognize that employment brand anymore. You want to have it to be, synchronized and make sense with each other. So I think those are a few of the things that come to mind. I've worked with our communications director too, just on materials for recruitment. And so I think as people are looking for school districts, we do a really good job in our community of sharing, like, hey, we're one of the top districts in Kansas. Hey, you can look on greatschools.com and niche.com, and we share that with our community and our public and our parents because we want them to bring their kids to our school. But we weren't using that in HR, but that partnership, I learned about those type of things, and I'm able to use those in recruitment because it matters to teachers too. Teachers want to know about your school district. And so that's been very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. And really and truly, like the way I've always kind of framed the HR department at really every school district across the country is it's really, when it gets down to brass tacks, like it's the only department within a public school district that is really, recruiting nationwide. So you think about like, enrollment marketing, for instance, at a public school district, you're really kind of zoned to a specific territory, a specific region, right? So your audience is very, I don't want to say it's very narrow, but it is much smaller than what the HR department has to work with, because like I'm sure you're going to recruiting fairs up in, up in Ohio and down in Florida and as far west as, Nevada and California to potentially recruit teachers. So, that message, that messaging and that branding, really needs to be on point because you're reaching such a wide ranging audience compared to like maybe other departments. So,
right.
Like I think that relationship with the communications office is crucial. And, it's been really cool from my perspective, being like, having a comms and marketing background to see, those two departments work a lot closer over the last couple of years. Just given all the challenges we're seeing in public education with recruiting teachers and obviously retaining teachers too. So,
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I wanted to ask you real quick. So I saw an Education Week survey from 2021 that 54% of teachers said they are somewhat likely or very likely to leave the profession in the next 2 years, which is actually 20% higher than what they said in 2019. Obviously, burnout from the pandemic has probably led to, most of that increase, if I had to guess. But, from your perspective, what are some things that can be done to slow this trend, and like how do you view HR's role in that? I mean, it's obviously a much larger issue that needs to be solved by more than just the HR department, but like I'm sure you have a perspective on that kind of post COVID and those numbers going up.
Yeah, so that's a good lead into how important retention is in your district, because you're right. I've seen those same numbers, and as you look at that, that's a large percentage of your current staff that could be leaving employment in your district, and so that's why retention is the new recruitment, because we've really got to focus on making sure that we can positively impact those people that are thinking about leaving. So as we look at those type of things, I really do think it's important to understand where your employees are and what you can do to positively impact that. One of the tools that we use here in our district is the engagement survey. I talked about that a little bit before, but with the engagement survey, we're really asking our employees those things about what's important to them in their workplace, asking them about how they feel about their supervisor, those type of things that are directly correlated to an employee's engagement, help us to understand what we can do to do better. And for me, it's really important to look at it also at the building level and work with the principals, because the principal really has the most direct impact over the things that correlate with an employee's engagement, either directly or indirectly. So helping that principal understand what are some things that they can do to positively impact the retention they're building and the engagement they're building, and helping them action plan and work on that can really help to reduce the percentage of people that want to leave. If you don't like your supervisor, you don't feel good about the people you work with, you don't feel good about the place where you work, you're going to be more likely to leave. And if you can address those and address some of those issues, then people want to stay. And so I think it's really important to understand where they are in order to be able to help figure out what to address. And the engagement survey does that. As we look at retention, I think we also have to look at some of the more, I would say, global issues besides things that are locally controlled. And so as I think about that, one of the things I would say is just we need to look at the overall, how do we feel about education and perception of education, and bring some positivity into that. There's a lot of great things that happen in education. There's a lot of great things that are going on, but it seems right now that there's a lot focused on the negativity. And I think, if you look at industrial organizational psychologists or other research studies, in the workplace, negativity will breed negativity. And so if you allow that negativity to continue to breed, it's just going to keep bringing your staff down. So I think from an HR perspective and from a PR communications perspective, we really need to think about how do we make sure that we're sharing positive news, that we're highlighting the good things that are happening, that we allow people to celebrate. I think those things are all very important to helping change that narrative so that where it feels more positive. And so sometimes I think we can be our own worst enemy, talking about how bad things are. So I think we need to change that mindset and talk about how good things are. And sure, there are things that need to be improved, and you're always going to have things that need to be better. But if you focus on what always needs to be better and the bad things, and that's where your focus is going to go, and that's what you're going to think about all the time. So I think changing that perception and looking, how do we share, celebrate, recognize, and encourage positivity, I think will help. So I think that's important. I think when we think about teachers in the workplace too, they have difficult jobs. And so they're constantly adjusting to curriculum and what's best and changes to student dynamics in their classrooms. And so I think we need to empower teachers as much as we can as professionals, and help them have some of that autonomy in the classrooms that will help them to feel better about their jobs too. And that's a tough one, I know, for a lot of school districts, a lot of places, but I think the more you can look at how can you empower your teachers to be the professionals they are, I think that's another way that can help. So I think those are things that if you can work on those type of things, you can help reduce that percentage that we're seeing in some of the research.
I love that. Yeah. And to that point of empowerment, empower them in a way that other professionals in other industries are empowered to do their jobs and come to the office on a daily basis and make their job arrangement more of an agreement rather than, here are the expectations. Like make it more of a mutually agreed upon set of, parameters and things related to the job rather than, here are the expectations, take it or leave it. It needs to be something that's, coming into the very start of the relationship with the school district, something that's mutually agreed upon. Because if they feel like they have, skin in the game and they've had a say in kind of, their job and the success of what they're doing, they probably will be more likely to stay, and that those retention numbers will get better. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had an executive director of learning services tell me one time that, we want to provide ingredients, but we want chefs. We don't just want cooks. And I thought it was a great way of kind of explaining, as I was coming into education to learn about, we don't want everything to be exactly the same and, look exactly the same. We want the teachers to be able to bring their talents, their experiences, their skills to make it unique and their own.
Yep, 100%. So we chatted a little bit earlier about the American Association of School Personnel, ASPA. I could talk a little bit more about your involvement in that, and I guess what got you initially involved in ASPA?
Yeah, so I was not an educator before I came into education. I didn't know anything about the education industry. So I knew I would need to adjust to learning. I knew about HR, but I didn't know about HR in school districts. And so I had the chance to talk with my predecessor who was retiring, and I just asked him, who do you go to? Who do you network with? What organizations do you participate in? And he told me about ASPA. And in my school district at the time, I was the only HR professional in my school district. There's a lot of school districts that have small HR teams, and so there wasn't anybody else in district to really talk to about HR. And so I had the opportunity to go to an annual conference in Chicago, and I met a lot of peers or professionals that are kind of in similar positions and having similar challenges. And so it was a great way to network, to get professional development, to learn about HR and education, and also to learn best practices that I can take back and bring back to make positive differences. And so it's that having that network of peers, having that professional development that's related to my job, really helped me starting out in education. And that's, I guess, really what started my involvement in ASPA, because it really did help me to transition into this industry, and also benefited me from that perspective. And I thought, well, I've got some things maybe for my private industry that I might be able to share. So I started putting in to present at conferences, and I started presenting at conferences, and then people started asking me, hey, would you be interested in? And so next thing I knew, I was on the board, and now I'm the president of the association.
I love it. Well, talk a little bit about what are some of your roles and or some of your responsibilities as the president of ASPA?
Sure. So what I would say is my most important role as president is really to help the executive director of the association with coaching, advice, support as she leads the organization. I serve as a member of the executive board. I help to lead our board meetings. I'm chair of the finance committee. I have the opportunity to participate in different various ASPA events in different capacities. But really, that most important role is serving the members and helping to, as an executive board, help provide that direction, strategic direction, coaching, and guidance for the organization.
That's awesome. So obviously we chatted about it earlier, but the ASPA conference is coming up this October 10th through the 13th. Can you give us a little? Yeah, can you give us a little preview about this year's conference and what people can expect?
Yeah, so it's the theme this year is Celebrate Our Superheroes. So it's been a couple years of extraordinary circumstances for all employees, and that's true for HR as well. And so we're coming together to kind of celebrate. This is an opportunity for us to get back together as a group. We get a chance to share our experiences, but also things that we've learned and things we keep doing to make things better in school districts. And so we have the first day is 12 pre-conference sessions. Those are longer, in-depth sessions, about 3 hours to really dive into a topic or subject. And then we have exceptional keynote speakers each day after that on various topics. And then we have about 100 clinic and ignite sessions, which are individual professional development sessions. They're different strands. So if your focus is on recruiting, there's things on recruiting. If your focus is on employee relations, you can go to those. But a great selection of professional development you can go to. One of the nice things about the conference that I've really picked up through the years is there are a lot of great practitioners that share information about best practices that have worked in their school systems. And I can't always take that and replicate that back in my school district, but I can get pieces of things that I can bring back to make a positive difference. So my favorite part is the networking with peers, where you get to have some conversations, and then also the professional development, the sessions.
That's awesome. I'm curious, have you seen a noticeable trend in the types of sessions that are going to be at this year's conference versus other years? Is there one particular topic that people seem to be focused on more than others kind of going in?
I would say I won't be able to tell you 100% until after the conference to see what sessions people attended. But I would say right now, staffing is extremely important. So I think across the United States, in North America, we're seeing staffing challenges across the board in all our positions. And so any session on staffing, on recruitment, on retention, I think is going to be something that's well attended and things that people are interested in. Another one that we've seen more and more interest in is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's a topic that we've seen increased interest in. as well. We host a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit as ASPA, and this year was our largest attendance ever. So that would just tell me that there's probably a lot of interest in the sessions for those as well.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, we're excited. This will be our first ASPA conference as a company at Rhodes Branding. So I know we're super excited to be involved, and hopefully we get the chance to pop in a lot of these sessions, because we're obviously always curious to hear what the pulse is right now among HR directors from across the country. So we're definitely excited, and we're honored that you guys are having us. So we end every podcast with the same question, and it's a fun question, and we are going to give you the magic wand, and all the powers that it wields. And if you had this magic wand, and you could fix or do one thing related to education, what would you do, and how would you use it?
That's a really interesting question. And I think the way I would answer that is I would, if I could wave my magic wand, I would have the industry of education on par and at level with the top industries out there. And so what that would mean to me is that the people in these professions would be treated and compensated like they were one of the most important things in society that can happen. And so that magic wand, and it's not really about the funding piece or, those type of things, but, when you think about the importance education has to society, to the community, to the nation, we're providing the future talent for all industries. And if we don't get that right, we're not supporting the needs of any industry. And so I think when you think about the importance of education, if we as a society could place the value on that appropriately so that it reflected it in compensation, and with making sure that we have people to support students, I think that would be what I would do. So I'm going to try and wave right now, and we can talk at the conference, see how it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we got a good chance. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Well, awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. If our audience members would like to connect with you or learn more about ASPA, how can they do so?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn. So if you look for Brian White on LinkedIn, you should be able to find me. I'm early in LinkedIn, so I actually have like one of those names. So college relations. I was a college recruiting manager for a while. So if you type in Brian White college relations, you'll definitely find me. Also early on Twitter. So at BC White is my Twitter handle. So you can find me on Twitter. And for ASPA, if you go to aspa.org, you'll find information about that organization. Or if you want to look at going to the conference, aspaconference.com is a great way to look at information for the conference.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you this fall, and again, really appreciate you taking the time. So much great insights from you today, and we're super excited to really see the continued relationship between communications and HR, kind of like we touched on. So we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll look forward to seeing you in Orlando as well.
Definitely. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you.